start, huh? You think so?
Sure.
You have to
I
unmute
unmuted
yourself.
myself.
All right, okay. I'll start then.
Welcome everyone to our Sifter of Dust Tea House discussion. We're wonderful that you've joined for another evening. Tonight we're very excited to have Susan and David Gould join us to talk about a very interesting topic, and I want to set it up a little bit. One of the things about the Baha'i faith and the Baha'i teachings is there's a lot in the Baha'i faith about religion as a form of education, but also as sort of a releaser of human potential, that the process of education, but also the process of religion, of God sending messengers to humanity, or the Baha'i faith itself as God's message for today, as we believe, is really to sort of help us uncover those treasures that lie within us and bring them to the surface. And if you think about education, what you do with children, you know, children are a limitless potential. And education is really a way of helping them discover what their own capacities are intellectually, socially, and so forth. That's what education does. When we send our kids to school, you know, they're really discovering themselves and broadening their environment, but they're learning more about the world at the same time they're learning about themselves. And so, you know, education is really about, it's a form of bringing out potential, right? And so one of the wonderful ideas in the Baha'i faith is that both Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha talk about this as a major purpose of religion generally, as bringing out our potential. So it's a sort of a novel way to think about religion. It's a really exciting way to think about religion. So that's why when we asked Susan and David to come and present, and they sent us over this topic, we thought this is going to be wonderful. So Susan Gould is the executive director of Manna on Main Street. It's a nonprofit serving individuals with food insecurity. She holds a BS in elementary education and an MS in nonprofit management. Her husband, David, is going to present with her today. David is an attorney in the Bucks County, Gould Law Associates. He does a variety of things in his law firm, solving difficult problems for people who otherwise would have no access to justice. Together, they live in the beautiful place called Bucks County, Pennsylvania. If you've never been there, it is a tourist place. It's beautiful. It's old stone farmhouses, and it's just gorgeous, and a couple of neat little towns. In that wonderful environment, they've spent their married life serving the children, junior youth, and youth of that area with activities to develop their capacity for spiritual growth and practice. My kids went to a camp that Susan and David have run for 31 years. It's called Camp Tabarsi at a Bucks County facility every summer, and with kids from Baha'i kids, mostly Baha'i kids from across the area, have gone to this. It's been wonderful. Together, they also have 3 adult children, 5 grandchildren, so we're really honored to have them come and talk to us about this really interesting topic. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan and David.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you, Kendall. And thank you, Charlotte, for inviting us. And I'm going to take a second to bring up the PowerPoint. So I wanted to start by just thanking Charlotte and Kendall for having this, for making this space. And I thank them primarily because as a Baha'i, every time I have to give a presentation, I have to prepare for a talk, what I find is that I learn so much, because within the Baha'i faith, we are responsible for learning. We don't have a clergy. We don't have experts that we all run to every time we need to give a talk. We go to the source. And so every single time that I and David together, we do any kind of presentation, we learn so much. We release some of our human potential. So thank you, Kendall and Charlotte, for this opportunity for us to grow as well. So I'm going to ask David to talk about, to just give an introductory about what we mean by releasing human potential. Although Kendall, you did a great job with it, but we'll let David expound on that as well.
Okay, we've asked the question that we're going to address, and that's particularly appropriate to the time in which we're living. Baha'is see this time as the fulfillment of the aspirations of all the world's great religions. So if you think of the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, we see that as a time where humanity is coming to its maturity. Now, one aspect of that maturity is to recognize the capacity and the right and the responsibility of every human being to investigate truth for themselves. And that investigation is necessary for the realization of their spiritual potential and their reality. So we ask, consistent with that dynamic, what forms of education enable each and all of the human family to realize their potential as minds rich in gems of inestimable value? And how does such a process contribute to the advancement of communities and our world? Now, when we talk about releasing human potential, we're talking about drawing on the power of truth to gain insight into who we are. And we do that physically and in terms of works in the world, and that largely relies on the force of science. But we also do that through the force of religion throughout the ages, which illumines our reality for us. Now, I was thinking about a prayer that I say every morning that I love, and it has one part that says, illumine my inner being, O my Lord, with the splendors of the day spring of thy revelation, even as thou dost illumine my outer being with the morning light of thy favor. We're blessed with a material sun, which promotes the physical growth of everything. But then at the same time, great messengers come periodically. As Krishna said, I come when the forces of righteousness are on the wane and the forces of unrighteousness are on the rise. And so this is a phenomenon that Baha'is see as inherent in our reality. And the day springs of God's revelation are those great messengers that we identify as the founders of the religions of the world. So these we regard as one essential phenomena, equal in their status. And that would range from Moses and Abraham to Jesus, to Buddha, to Krishna, to Muhammad. And they come to illuminate our inner beings in a way that allows us, as essentially scientists of love, to gain knowledge of ourselves and continue to investigate what lies within us. And that's this releasing of human potential.
Of course, this education that we're speaking of evolves within a context, and the context is the unfoldment of a new world order. And David is going to speak about this new world order and what this new world order means.
We've advanced across time as a species, not recognizing that we are a species, one species. The first quote that you see is a reflection of what is true for all faiths, all religions, that they are animated by a fundamental purpose to safeguard the interests and promote the unity of the human race and to foster the spirit of love and fellowship amongst men. Baha'u'llah says, you were created to show love one to another, not perversity or rancor. That our reality is to be lovers of each other. The utterance of God is a lamp whose light is these words: you are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch. Deal you one with another with the utmost love and harmony, with friendliness and fellowship. And this last sentence is important to what we face as a world in our development. So powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth. This unity is essential in the view of the religion of God, and we've moved up through different stages. So at one point during the revelation of Jesus, he said that the first commandment is that you should love the Lord with all your heart and with all your soul. But he said the second commandment, which is akin or like the first, is that you should love your neighbor in the same way. So you have that connection, you'll see it in each of the great faiths of God. At this stage, what our world says to us is that we will not succeed unless we become united, unless we work together to coordinate the affairs of the globe and not be held back by limited identities, limited groupings. And that's in this last quote: unification of the whole of mankind is the hallmark of the stage which human society is now approaching. Unity of family, of tribe, of city-state, and nation have been successively attempted and fully established. World unity is the goal towards which a heroic humanity is striving. Nation building has come to an end. The anarchy inherent in state sovereignty is moving towards a climax. A world growing to maturity must abandon this fetish, recognize the oneness and wholeness of human relations, and establish once for all the machinery that can best incarnate this fundamental principle of its life. And so from a Baha'i standpoint, we're moving towards a unity that's founded on the consciousness of the oneness of humanity. We are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch.
Now, within this unfoldment, what we have is three protagonists of progress. And these three protagonists are the individuals, the institutions, and the community. And as you think of those three, just think to yourself, you as an individual. Think about the community within which you live. And think about the institutions that you live under. Think about how you interact, the feelings that you have as you approach institutions, the way in which, as you're moving within your community, you interact with people. And keeping those thoughts in mind, I'm going to read this quote. Every follower of Baha'u'llah knows well that the purpose of his revelation is to bring into being a new creation. No sooner had, quote, the first call gone forth from his lips than the whole creation was revolutionized, and all that are in the heavens and all that are on the earth were stirred to the depths. And that is a quote from Baha'u'llah. The individual, the institutions, and the community, the three protagonists in the divine plan, are being shaped under the direct influence of his revelation. And a new conception of each, appropriate for a humanity that has come of age, is emerging. The relationships that bind them too are undergoing a profound transformation, bringing into the realm of existence civilization building powers which can only be released through conformity with his decree. At a fundamental level, these relationships are characterized by cooperation and reciprocity, manifestations of the interconnectedness that governs the universe. So as you think about these three protagonists, the individuals, the institutions, and the community, and how that plays out in your life, consider what it would be like if cooperation and reciprocity was how you dealt with problems within the community, how your institutions dealt with the community and individuals, and how different that would feel. And all over the world, Baha'i communities are going through this process. Within the Baha'i community, within Baha'i communities, individuals are engaged in acts of service that draws them together as a community, that draws other members of their community to them, and then influences the institutions that guide them, both Baha'i institutions and also secular institutions. And this is a pattern for community building and for civilization building that at its root has a spiritual fundamental unity. And so it's very exciting to see. And I would urge you, as you are involved in activities that involve individuals, institutions, and the community, look for that. Look for cooperation and reciprocity, because those are the things that can bind individuals, institutions, and the community to make true change.
Just as an aside, I would emphasize that this process that Susan spoke about, that's being enacted around the world, is not just about Baha'is or just for Baha'is. It is a call to humanity in general to arise to rebuild communities, to rebuild our society, to move towards a world order that will reflect the oneness of humankind. Now, critical in that process is the empowerment of all of the individuals that are on the planet. For too long, our planet has been balkanized and separated according to group identities, to the exercise of power, with one group pitted against another, with our egos dependent on our being better than other people, and therefore needing to see ourselves as better than them, rather than recognizing something that is inherent in the great religions. And this quote particularly emphasizes something that all humanity needs to truly illumine their reality. Now, when I say illumine reality, I mean within us. How do we think about ourselves? In the Baha'i teachings, Baha'u'llah stresses that man is the supreme talisman. And by that, he's speaking about our capacity to acquire and to put out in the world all the qualities that we identify with God or with what's highest in humanity. So justice, loving kindness, hopefulness, steadfastness, trustworthiness. So we have this capacity to demonstrate this, but lack of a proper education, however, deprived him of that which he doth inherently possess. Through a word proceeding out of the mouth of God, he was called into being. By one word more, he was guided to recognize the source of his education. By yet another word, his station and destiny were safeguarded. The great being saith, regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. Education can alone cause it to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit therefrom. The first point of illumination of this quote is this strong, unequivocal affirmation of our capacity, that we are mines rich in gems of inestimable value. At another place, Baha'u'llah says, I have created thee noble. Wherefore dost thou bring thyself down to abasement? The statement that needs to be infused in all aspects of our culture, in all aspects of the lives that we lead, is that we are inherently noble, that we are inherently each and all of us minds rich in gems and inestimable value. With that conception, you have the hopefulness and you have the knowledge that you are something and that you can be something, that it lies within you, but that you need the means to delve into yourself. Now, this is part and parcel of what Susan was referring to, of a universal worldwide process of empowering people to develop what is within them spiritually and materially. And it is a process that has to extend to reach all of humanity. For example, there is an individual that grew up in the heart of India, in a village. And if he had lived according to the ways of that village and how they had been for centuries and centuries, his potentiality as a computer engineer, ultimately developing systems that serve all of India, would never have been developed. The point of that is true for each and every human being on the planet. They all are minds inherent with rich in gems of inestimable value. And we need to enable them to bring them out for humanity. Now, I'll give you an example of the kind of education that's involved through the light of religion. Now, some of these you'll recognize. So one would be truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtue. Truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtue. That principle needs to permeate the reality in which we operate, how we think about ourselves, how we build our spiritual understanding and our potential. You can grasp the importance of that as a matter of logic, but yet is it present in our society? It is not at the moment, because our society needs to be illuminated with the idea that fundamentally you cannot progress unless you proceed from truthfulness. Another example might be that in order to proceed with an investigation, you have to proceed with patience. That if you have an anticipated result that you seek, that you are going to then be looking to fulfill that result rather than look for what you need to guide you. Now, Baha'is believe very strongly that religion and science are only speaking about one truth, just from different vantage points. Science, of course, investigates material reality and pulls from it understandings about how it operates, which we then exploit to the benefit of humanity. At the same time, religion provides principles that illuminate our inner reality. But our validation or exploration of them or determining their truth depends on us being scientists of love, meaning that these truths are rational, are logical, are truth, but they are discerned by us because we seek them out with purity, for instance, and with truthfulness. If you deviate from that and you seek to accomplish something that's extrinsic to the truth of it, for instance, you want to control a congregation, and so you take a principle and you corrupt it in order to govern that congregation. But we need, in order to be able to proceed, to see religion as this illumination that is going to be beneficial to all individuals and to all of society.
The quote that David just expounded on talks about a proper education, but it doesn't fully define what a proper education is. And as David and I were thinking about our talk, we began to think, what is a proper education? What does that look like in the many different communities around the world? Is there one type of education that can fit everyone? And of course, there is not. But we would say that there is a framework for a proper education. And the quote that I'm going to go through is from Abdu'l-Baha, Some Answered Questions. And Abdu'l-Baha is Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith's son. And he talked in the early 1900s about education. And as you're listening to this, you might not see it as very revolutionary, but if you think about the early 1900s, anywhere in the world, how revolutionary this would have been. So Abdu'l-Baha talked about three kinds of education: material, human, and spiritual. And he said material education aims at the growth and development of the body and consists in securing its sustenance and obtaining the means of its ease and comfort. This education is common to both man and animal. So consider parents anywhere in the world. For their children, they teach them how to eat, to feed themselves. They teach them how to stay safe. They teach them how to walk. They teach them how to interact, all for the purpose of survival. And this is common for both man and any species that nurtures its young. Human education, however, consists in civilization and progress. That is sound governance, social order, human welfare, commerce and industry, arts and sciences, momentous discoveries, and great undertakings. These are the central features distinguishing man from the animal. And this human education takes place within the context of the community, and it takes place under the supervision of institutions. Now, the third type of education is something that David has talked about in that quote, and that is divine education. It is the education of the kingdom. It comes from religion and consists in acquiring divine perfections, often called virtues, and those gems of inestimable value. This indeed is true education, for by its virtue, man becomes the focal center of divine blessings and the embodiment of the verse, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness." This is the ultimate goal of the world of humanity. This type of education is really what transforms communities, transforms individuals, and can transform communities. And the interesting thing about the Baha'i Faith, and one of the things that I really loved when I started investigating the Baha'i Faith, something that was so attractive to me, was the idea of universal compulsory education, a principle that from the start of the Baha'i Faith in the mid-1800s was a principle. Again, think about this now, universal compulsory education. That is a principle that everyone, most people would accept, most people in the world. However, at the time that it was revealed by Baha'u'llah, this was not a principle that had taken hold in many places in the world. And the Universal House of Justice, which is the supreme governing body of the Baha'is of the world, in a letter to the Baha'is of the world in Rizwan 2010 said, "Access to knowledge is the right of every human being, and participation in its generation, application, and diffusion a responsibility that all must shoulder in the great enterprise of building a prosperous world civilization, each individual according to his or her talents and abilities. Justice demands universal participation." I love this because it is putting the responsibility of making sure that every human being is educated squarely on the shoulders of each of us. It is saying that its generation, application, and diffusion, a responsibility that all must shoulder in the great enterprise of building a prosperous world civilization. So as individuals, we have that responsibility within our community and demanding this of our institutions to make sure that every human being is educated. And then Abdu'l-Baha, again, in the early 1900s, wrote something which very revolutionary. Education holds an important place in the new order of things. The education of each child is compulsory. If there is not money enough in a family to educate both the girl and the boy, the money must be dedicated to the girl's education, for she is the potential mother. If there are no parents, the community must educate the child. In addition to this widespread education, each child must be taught a profession, art, or trade, so that every member of the community will be enabled to earn his own livelihood. Work done in the spirit of service is the highest form of worship. So this framework and this command of universal compulsory education is together what we think of as a proper education. And then the individual parts of an education curriculum and the organization of it would be different according to the needs of particular communities around the world. So in closing, we would like to have a discussion about what do you think constitutes a proper education and what are the goals of such an education. And David is going to take us through these two quotes, and then we will open it up for discussion.
I just, before I do that, I wanted to touch on an insight some of you may have had, which is that Susan referred to these quotes, these aspirational quotes, as being revolutionary at the time they were uttered. They are still revolutionary because they are not embraced by the generality of humanity. A lot of enlightened individuals around the world recognize that the principles that were being cited are essential. We have to reach all of humanity individually and collectively to transform them or to enable them to come to the understanding of their essential unity with all humanity, and that their destiny is to be as spiritual beings, that they are fulfilled as spiritual beings, and in carrying out that fulfillment and service to humanity. Otherwise, it just becomes aspirational words. So the process that the Baha'is are engaged in is addressing humanity on the grassroots level and striving to build up, working cooperatively with people of all stripes to educate the children, to transform the ideals of young youth who are conceiving of what horizons they should have in their lives, of enabling adults to be transformed and to fulfill their capacity where they had been denied it or not given the full utilization of that capacity. And I'll give you one reflection before I go to the things. In teaching children's classes recently, one class was on the idea of hopefulness. And the class really inculcated in the kids this idea that they should proceed in life with hopefulness. I wish that I had gotten such a training, because although I have gone past the age of maturity and strive to achieve that, a lot of times I have to fight against a tendency to be anxious or see the negative in things, to not be hopeful. Hopefulness is an attribute, it's a state of mind. And it's something that we're inculcating in children so that they proceed optimistically, They proceed with energy rather than anxiety and depression. And it is a hallmark of this process that this should occur. So, and in considering what constitutes a proper education, the first is, again, the quote, "Man is the supreme talisman. Lack of a proper education hath, however, deprived him of that which he doth inherently possess. Through a word proceeding out of the mouth of God, he was called into being. By one word more, he was guided to recognize the source of his education. By yet another word, his station and destiny were safeguarded." Excuse me. "The great being saith, regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. Education can alone cause it to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit therefrom." And this last is a hidden word from Baha'u'llah. "O my servants, ye are the trees of my garden. You must give forth goodly and wondrous fruits, that ye yourselves and others may profit therefrom. Thus, it is incumbent on everyone to engage in crafts and professions, for therein lies the secret of wealth. O men of understanding." I know she's bringing it back for me.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
We need to just finish this up so that we can get to our discussion.
I agree.
I'm having technical difficulties. There we go.
All right. O ye men of understanding, for results depend upon means, and the grace of God shall be all sufficient unto you. Trees that yield no fruit have been and will ever be for the fire. And I look around at all of you, and the first thing that I would say is that I hope that you are all grateful that you have been given education, that you have been empowered. But what do you guys think about what a proper education is?
Well, I tend to be an icebreaker, if you don't mind.
Excellent.
I've been thinking about this stuff for 80 years. So since I was 5 years old. And I keep repeating the lines I'm going to share with you frequently, you know, here and there. I don't sit down and do it. It just comes to me constantly. But it reflects everything you're talking about. Every person has all they need, not greed, to survive first. So they can thrive. So you can't thrive if you don't survive.
Mhm.
So that's the material.
Right.
They have to be able to have body, just like Abraham Maslow's,
Mhm.
needs and so on. And according to their innate gifts, talents, and interests. So we have gifts, we have talents, and we have interests. All of that has to be taken into consideration, and location for that matter.
Mhm.
I didn't write that one down.
Mm.
And not everybody needs the same thing. Some person may need a whole bunch of something, and someone else doesn't need much at all. So it's not a matter of who gets the most money. It's who gets what they need to survive, to thrive, to fulfill their potential. So that has something to do with how money is dealt with. And that's a whole other topic, which we're not going into. So that's the first thing. I don't want to go beyond that because it gets other people need to have a chance to talk. But that's my first thoughts about it.
So people get what they need to survive so that they can thrive is first.
Mhm.
And then that they need the means to bring out their specific talents and faculties.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And interests.
Mhm.
Some people can be interested in something and not have the faculty necessarily, but they still should be allowed to pursue whatever. Well, the third one on education, this is my most favorite. This is the one I didn't talk about. Do you want me to talk about that now?
Sure.
Please.
Well, I'm an educator, so I can't help it. I've been doing it so many years. Educare means bringing out your innate true self. It's a religious term to begin with.
Mhm.
You don't have to bring it in. It's already there. Most people don't realize the source of educare is to bring out who you truly are, your gifts, your talents, but also your God-givenness, your metaphysical potential. That's also there. And it takes religion and practice, worship, whatever, to do that. You have to put the time into that. And that's the only way we're going to evolve to our full potential of unification and all of the virtues that support the one world order.
Mhm.
You have to have that. You have to have that beautiful course on consultation. You have to have that in your very brain at 5 years old almost. You know, you have to know that.
Yeah.
And once you have that, it's much easier. So that's why it's important to have education early and quick and densely, intensely, until people can walk on their God-given own, not someone else forcing them to go to Sunday school with,
Let me raise something else I think was implicit, if not explicit, in your presentation, and that is, of course, there are different forms of education, but it also strikes me that we can't build the world we want to build without all three being addressed, right? And the one that I think that our secular society focuses on are the top two, the material education, helping people figure out how to get to the basic necessities of life and supplying those basic necessities within the structure of our society. And then, of course, the civilization, advancement of arts and sciences, which I think is well appreciated in modern societies that are doing well. But, I think this other aspect, and David, you had mentioned this, and I think I just want to hover on it a bit, and that is this spiritual education, this virtues. And it wasn't apparent to me when I was younger. I mean, I would read the Baha'i quotes, but I didn't have it in my gut until I've gotten older and watched the world go by. And, if people are selfish, it just doesn't work. You just can't get selfish people who are attached to their own gods of different forms, flags and whatever, whatever it is that they self-identify with, their tribal identities. You just can't get them to be unified. That the only thing that gets people to be unified is that they have to be more attached to spiritual principles, what we call spiritual principles, but are really these beautiful virtues of justice and things. They have to have that native attraction for that. The founders of American society, they had their differences, but they were all attracted. They were basically more deeply moral people who wanted to see in their society a reflection of the ideals, So it seems that you really need to nurture these ideals within people, that spiritual education piece, which, Abdu'l-Wahab talks about as being part of the kingdom, because all the problems I see are when people don't have those things, and then they fall back to the tribal identities and the other things. But I just wanted to see what you all thought about that, because I think that's the thing.
All I can say is hearing this talk just reminded me of how important virtues are. I mean, those are the gems. And in all my life, I never really heard virtues specifically explained and thought about and talked about until being introduced to the Baha'i faith. And so then I was happy that was something I could share with my children. But in my religious education, no one ever was explicit about virtues. There were the stories that exemplified virtues, it was sort of talked around instead, and I'm very basic. I need, give me the actual like facts or whatever. And I just think it's a good thing that virtues are, I just feel like they should be taught in schools. It should be a subject in school, you know, English, math, and virtues. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Just wanted to mention that that's how I see things at this point.
Well, I think truth has an attractive force. And I think it draws love to us. And let me give you an example. By applying the teachings of the Baha'i faith, but then they are often teachings that have been universally revealed, I come to have an illumination of myself and then of my life. So an example would be this, that the first of Baha'u'llah's hidden words is to possess a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, that thine may be a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. And like all deep things, you have to think about it. You have to reflect on it. But I had a revelation having studied that and thought about it. I was still in law school and I was participating in a contest to get on what they call an honor society. And like most of us, when I was in the contest, I would be thinking about what the other guy was doing wrong. I would be focusing on the negative about what he did, because I was sort of secretly hoping that he would capsize his own boat, right? Well, I realized that what that was doing to me was bringing me down to the earth of anxiety and misery. And that I was not, in coming up for my turn, happy. I was not sovereign. I was not lifted up from the crud of what can be in each of us. So what I did was I realized that what Baha'u'llah was saying to me in part was to be the well-wisher of my opponent. And I began to actively want him to succeed, to do the best that he could do. That it was only going to be meaningful to me if I did the best that I could do, not that he failed. Once I began to think that way, I was buoyed up. I was lifted up. I was like the eagle, high above the anxiety and the misery. And so then when I got up to do my part, I did the best that I possibly could have done, because I was free, I was happy, I had the inspiration and the energy of happiness. And so that was an experience that caused me to fall in love with truth. And the truth was coming from God, the revelation of God. And so it enhanced my love for that revelation. But it was that truth that enkindled my heart. And there are so many things that are like that for us. I mean, to realize what it would be like to fulfill our being created to love one another, what would it be like to walk into a gathering of people where each person was loving each other? I mean, that's phenomenal. And if you could get a glimpse of that, of the possibility of that, you fall in love with that. And it becomes the inspiration for you to continue your transformation. And that's why this education is so important for every person on the planet. Because they can't, as Kendall says, be enkindled or have this make any sense unless they fall in love with the light and the happiness that this truth gives them.
That's a beautiful story, David. It made me think of circumstances in my own life in which I have come to the same conclusion. I guess, just I was in a competition sort of for a job issue, and what happens when you're doing that, you focus on the differences, and you see this in political parties, you see this in religions, right? But in politics is the most bare bones reality of it. People will focus on everything they disagree on, which may be 1% of what their policy platform. but they're trying to distinguish themselves from the other guy. So it becomes this whole ego thing, and it's completely uncollaborative. And it just, to me, it just seems the whole politics thing seems incredibly childish. It's just ridiculous. Because you're not focusing on the truth of the matter. You're not engaging with it in a collaborative way. It's all about trying to be better in the eyes of others, which is just not the opposite of where we need to go as a world if we're going to solve our problems together, which is what we have to do if we want to solve the problems.
I know I was reflecting on this spiritual aspect of education, and Kendall, you touched on this too. As children, our kids are 8 and 9, and they focus on all the school subjects, but then sports or dance or art, and there's not an emphasis on spiritual education, and there's not a vocabulary for it. And I think like Michelle mentioned, just being able to address or understand what justice is, or selflessness, or generosity. And it also gives, I know in the children's classes that I've taught, having the parents present, listening to the lessons too, has been an amazing growth experience for them, because at the beginning of class, I had like a spiritual growth chart on the wall, and it listed all these lovely virtues. And I would say, so I'd ask the parents, what virtue did your child show this week? And they would go, okay, hold on. And then they'd look at all these virtues and identify what their child had demonstrated. And it was just a really nice way for parents. I could actually see them like processing this new vocabulary that, like you said, Michelle, they hadn't really been given before. Like, oh, I can praise my son when he's generous and kind and loving and just. And I love that hopefulness, David, because that's something we all need, and just to give our children and ourselves this vocabulary where we can just incorporate it into our daily lives and reflect on what that means to be hopeful and to care about others and to serve others, because it just gives us such something like you were saying, Regina, about thriving. If we're thriving spiritually, for me, that is really what thriving is about. And I see, Charlie, you've come on. That's great.
Charlie.
I was busy with dinner.
Oh.
Good to see you, Charlie.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
Let me share a little quickie with you while Charlie is digesting.
Thank you.
We have a devotional group, and we're doing Virtues Project. We've actually turned the Virtues Project into our devotional, and we've been doing it on Zoom for 15 months. So there's 52 devotional cards. So we've really pretty well gone through the pile. But we love it. There's roughly 12 adults that come from 3 different states. And we start out with taking a virtues card or a Baha'u'llah reading or any spiritual reading that people want to do. But like the one this week is discernment, one of my favorites. And that's one of the most difficult of the spiritual. But anyway, what we're doing is the first round that we go, each person reads reads a small portion of their card, and then we have a little 20-second time to reflect. The second time, we start with a prayer, of course. The second time around, after we've read it, now we are going to reflect on it, tell what we reflected on. We read it the first round. The second time, we really deeply reflect on that word and tell what it means to us, an experience in our life, or what it says to us that we need to pay attention to. And the third time around, we have to have an action point. And that means we have to do something about that virtue that needs to be done. And we have not yet found one that didn't need some tweaking, because every situation in life challenges us in a new way. And it's going to call upon that virtue to strengthen, because overall our virtue is generally low in our culture. Our culture makes it low. So here we are trying to make it high, but the culture, in a sense, we're culture bound because of it. And we have to develop the skills to push back into with the virtue. And that means literally, as you were saying, reparenting ourselves. We have to reparent ourselves. We have to give ourselves what we miss. So when we talk to the kids or anyone, the adult children running around acting like 2-year-olds, that we will know what to say to help them. So that's what we're doing.
Hmm,
It's working nicely.
very nice.
Love that.
You're welcome to come and visit sometime. Sunday afternoon at 4.
Aw,
That's or Nancy Wetseam, maybe. Anyway, in New Jersey on the shore.
Aw.
One of the things that I think religion does also is to somehow tap, and I'm curious to see what others think about this, somehow tap into our motivation. If somebody came to me and talked about virtues, I probably would be falling asleep looking up sports scores on my phone. But there's something about the passages, the scriptures of humanity, and particularly the Baha'i writings for me, but also certainly many gospel passages and others from the Quran, but that really hit me in a way that motivates me. And there's this aspect of religion, I think, of really pushing us, moving us, inspiring us. You're just in love. There's a wonderful passage in Abdu'l-Baha's writings where he talks about anything to happen, it needs 3 things: knowledge, volition, and action. So, knowledge is you kind of know what the right thing is. Volition is you have the motivation to do the right thing. And then there's the action that follows from those two. But I think religion does something more than, say, a civics class might give you, right? Is it really sort of gives you this love and desire, that you'd sacrifice anything. I mean, people of all faiths, I see it in the Baha'i faith. I see people who, just give their lives and give everything they can, give all their money because they want to see these things spread, and it's just it's out of love. So I'm just curious, what others feel on that about in terms of the impact of religion itself.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you share it in a way that is focusing on the love that you feel. I often think that as I'm thinking about the Baha'i faith and its teachings, and as I'm meditating on God's purpose for me, for our world, I see it as this pure energy. And I've never really thought about it as love, but now that I think about it, I could define it also as this pure love. But this energy that has no motivation except for the development of us as individuals and the world coming together in unity. That is the motivation. And so there's no ulterior motivations. There's nothing that you have to be suspicious about. And where else in your life do you have that? I mean, there's, truly, unless you are in just the most amazing marriage or the most amazing friendship, there's no relationship that we are in with another human being that does not have some facets of ulterior motivations from, every once in a while, or something that the other person is doing, or your colleagues. But the energy that I get from the faith, from the writings, it's just pure. It's like, this is what you need to do in order to advance yourself, advance your family, advance your community, advance the world. And so it's very clean and pure. And that's what I love, but I can see how I could really just think of that as love as well.
So we're running up against an hour and a half. So and we try to keep us under an hour, but we were having such good discussion that I wanted to keep things going. So any final thoughts?
This has been very thought provoking, and I really appreciate your presentation and everyone's input and discussion too. It's been really, really helpful.
So
So
Nicole
we
is
have our-
asking to be unmuted.
Oh, sorry,
We have
Nicole.
our dear friend Nicole that's got to be unmuted.
Sorry, you're on
I just wanted to give my love to everybody here from California. I heard you guys, some of you are having a thunderstorm, and I just want to boast that, beautiful sunny day right over here. I have
That's
my
my
mom.
best friend right there.
There you go. Bam. Come on over here to the best side, the west side. No, I'm just kidding. So Charlotte is my best friend and amazing spiritual mentor in a lot of ways. And I am a Baha'i, and I just wanted to chime in and say, wow, Susan, thank you for pointing out that the concept that we don't have in society, that this world is for everybody. It's for everybody, whether they're mentally ill, homeless, drug addicts, different colors, don't wear clothes, whatever it is, this world is for everybody. And everybody, in order for the world to be for everybody, everybody has to have a voice in this world. And I agree. I don't want to go into detail, but I work with homeless, and I have one who is schizophrenic, and all the services that are created for her don't work for her. And there's no solution that exists in our community. So I appreciate that. This world is for everybody. No mistake. It's not, and it's not working for everybody right now. And I'm so happy to meet you all. And my mom is here. So she didn't want to be on video because her hair isn't.
Sure.
So she said her hair looks like a cornfield. So
Oh, Lana, I'm sure.
great.
That's good.
We wanted to.
I've been listening to everything, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, she's very in alignment, and that's probably why I became a Baha'i, but then she followed after. So being a Baha'i just means that once we embrace Baha'u'llah, we just then go, oh shoot, we have a lot of work to do, both on ourselves, in our communities. And it's so transformative to the individual when we, kind of try really hard to apply his principles and struggle through it. So I welcome anybody who wants to embrace this faith and work alongside with us, shoulder to shoulder. Kendall, this is an amazing platform. Your website is beautiful. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so glad I could jump on, and I'm sorry I've talked too long, so I'll let you guys go.
Thank
well,
you.
Yeah, I'm glad we finally got to hear your voice, Nicole.
I know, Nicole. Thank you.
It was well worth it, Nicole. I'm going to edit out that last part. The
No, you're.
me, but other than that,
What about California being
Thanks
better?
for so I really want to thank David and Susan for coming and putting together your thoughts tonight and getting us started on a wonderful conversation. It really was enjoyable. Really appreciate it. Please come back. We have a tradition of the people who speak with us never coming back to another program. So we're going to be doing an alumni tour and asking them to come back and join us. So please come back for future ones as well, as we invite other people to come and speak. I had been holding off on doing an introduction to the writings of Baha'u'llah. We had done earlier, and it was corrupted, and so we're going to redo it. But I actually wanted to do it a little differently. I wanted to do it sort of from my own perspective of exploring the writings of Baha'u'llah, what books I read, how they influenced me, how I went to the next one, and so forth. Kind of a more personal introduction to the writings of Baha'u'llah. And I'd really love you to come back if, and share your own experiences with the writings of Baha'u'llah in particular, because I want to introduce them to people. They're different, right? There's nothing like the writings of Baha'u'llah that you will ever read anywhere. They're remarkable. And you almost have to, one of the things I'm going to talk about is you just have to come to terms with the fact that this is really something quite different than I've ever read before. And you have to get your mind around what it could mean for you. And so that's what we're going to do. So I really invite you to come back, and we're going to have a lot of good discussion on that.
Well, thanks for joining. This has been really great.
Yeah.
What can I start with?
It's been lovely being with you all.
Mhm.
And knowing that we are all in our hearts wanting to be the source of good for the world.
Mm.
And that we want to reach out to other people and work with them and build new communities and a new world.
Yeah, I think that as I don't want this to sound negative, but I think there's just a certain population of people that are always striving to be good and do good. And I like to find those people, doesn't matter what background or religion they worship or if they're
Mhm.
atheists, but those are the people, those are my tribe.
Mhm.
And I can't mute myself because if I do, I won't be able to unmute. So if you hear something,
Sorry, I don't know
I have
why.
a lot of animals. So
That's a good point, though, Nicole, to look for them,
Mhm.
to seek to recognize them, to be a seeker of the people that strive to do good,
Yeah.
and then to ally with them, because that's how the drops will become an ocean.
Mm.
Mhm.
yeah, I love that. It's funny because it does sound really utopian, like we're all going to be drops of the ocean together. But, but I mean, I don't think there's any other direction I want to head in.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
Well,
the more poignant example that David and Susan brought up is that, living organisms, I think it was in the House of Justice letter, living organisms are cooperative enterprises, right? Anything that's alive reflects the cooperation of billions of atoms and cells and working together in coordination. So
Yeah.
drops of the ocean are sort of amorphous, but if you think of us as being something that's more organized.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
Good
you.
night, everybody.
Everyone have a great
you.
evening.
Have a splendid
Bye-bye.
sleep and a great tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye. Bye.